The year was 1983. The world was a tinderbox, poised on the precipice of nuclear annihilation. The Cold War, a decades-long standoff between the United States and the Soviet Union, had reached a fever pitch. Tensions were high, mistrust ran deep. Both superpowers possessed vast arsenals of nuclear weapons. Each side lived in constant fear of a surprise attack. Propaganda fueled paranoia. The threat of mutually assured destruction loomed large, a terrifying specter haunting the global stage. In this climate of suspicion and fear, a single incident could have tipped the scales, igniting a conflict that would have reshaped the world. And that incident happened. A siren wailed, a red telephone rang, and the fate of humanity hung precariously in the balance. Stanislav Petrov, a lieutenant colonel in the Soviet Air Defense Forces, was an unassuming man. Born on September 7, 1939 in Vladivostok, he grew up in a country that was often on the brink of conflict. His early life was marked by the hardships of World War II and the subsequent Cold War tensions. Despite these challenges, Petrov excelled in his studies and eventually pursued a career in the military, specializing in engineering and early warning systems. Thrust into an extraordinary situation, on that fateful night in September 1983, the world was teetering on the edge of nuclear catastrophe. The Cold War had created an atmosphere of intense suspicion and fear, with both the United States and the Soviet Union on high alert for any signs of aggression. He was not a politician or a general. He was an ordinary man, a dedicated engineer who had spent years honing his skills to ensure the safety of his nation. His role was crucial, yet he remained largely unknown outside his immediate circle. He was an engineer trained to monitor early warning systems for signs of nuclear attack. These systems were designed to detect incoming missiles and provide the Soviet leadership with the critical minutes needed to respond. The responsibility was immense, and the margin for error was virtually non-existent. Petrov was a cog in the vast Soviet military machine, tasked with a grave responsibility. The military infrastructure was complex and sprawling, with countless individuals working in unison to maintain national security. Yet, in this intricate web, Petrov's role was uniquely pivotal. His job was to analyze data, to watch for anomalies, to be the first line of defense against a nuclear strike. He spent countless hours in front of screens, scrutinizing every blip and signal, knowing that any mistake could have catastrophic consequences. He knew the weight of his duty, the potential consequences of a mistake. The pressure was immense, and the stakes were nothing less than the survival of millions. Every decision he made was a delicate balance between caution and action. On September 26, 1983, Petrov reported for duty at Serpukhov 15, a secret bunker outside Moscow. This facility was a nerve center for the Soviet Union's early warning system, a place shrouded in secrecy and critical to national defense. It was just another day at the office, or so he thought. The routine was familiar, the procedures well rehearsed, yet beneath the surface of normalcy, the tension of the Cold War loomed large, a constant reminder of the ever-present threat. Little did he know that he was about to face a test that would define his life and, quite possibly, the fate of the world. In the quiet of that bunker, as the world slept, Petrov's actions would soon determine the course of history, a testament to the profound impact one individual can have in the face of overwhelming odds. In the early hours of the morning, the unthinkable happened. The world was still asleep, wrapped in the quiet embrace of dawn. But in a dimly lit bunker, the tranquility was shattered. Sirens blared throughout the bunker, their piercing wails echoing off the cold concrete walls. The sound was deafening, a harbinger of doom. The Soviet early warning system, known as OKO or I, detected an incoming missile launch. The radar screens lit up with ominous red blips, each one representing a potential catastrophe. Not just one missile, but five. 5 deadly arcs traced across the screen, each one a harbinger of destruction. The implications were staggering. The computer system confirmed the threat, its cold, calculating logic indicating a nuclear attack by the United States. The data was clear, the threat undeniable. Panic surged through the bunker. Soldiers and officers scrambled, their training momentarily forgotten in the face of what seemed like certain annihilation. Petrov's colleagues were in shock. The unthinkable was happening. faces turned pale, eyes wide with fear and disbelief. The weight of the moment pressed down on everyone. The training, the drills, the worst-case scenarios they had discussed. It was all unfolding before their eyes. Every protocol, every procedure was now being put to the ultimate test. The protocol was clear: report the attack up the chain of command. The next steps were supposed to be automatic, a well-oiled machine of retaliation. Retaliation, swift and merciless, was the only option. Petrov, however, hesitated. Something didn't feel right. His instincts, honed over years of service, told him to pause. The system, as advanced as it was not infallible. Petrov knew this. He had seen glitches before, anomalies that made him question the system's reliability. He had always harbored doubts about its reliability. The stakes were too high to act on a hunch, but the consequences of inaction were equally dire. 5 missiles seemed like a strange tactical choice for a first strike. Why only 5? It didn't make sense. A full-scale attack would involve many more. This discrepancy gnawed at him. Petrov made a decision that would change the course of history. He chose to trust his gut, to question the data, and to hold off on reporting the attack. It was a gamble, but one he felt he had to take. Minutes passed, each one feeling like an eternity. Slowly, the tension in the bunker began to ease. The radar screens remained clear. No further missiles appeared. Petrov's gamble had paid off. The alert was a false alarm, a glitch in the system. His decision had averted a potential nuclear catastrophe. In that moment, Petrov became a silent hero, his actions unknown to the world but monumental in their impact. Section 4, Petrov's choice, trusting his gut over cold calculations. In those heart-stopping moments, with the world holding its breath, Petrov faced a choice. He could follow protocol, trust the machines, and report the attack. Or he could trust his gut, his intuition, his sense that something was amiss. The pressure was immense. The fate of millions, perhaps billions, rested on his shoulders. His superiors were demanding answers. The clock was ticking. Every second brought the world closer to the brink. In a decision that would later be hailed as an act of extraordinary courage and judgment, Petrov chose to disobey. He told his superiors it was a false alarm. He dismissed the computer warnings as a malfunction. He staked his career, his reputation, perhaps even his life on a hunch. Section 5, Averting Armageddon, the immediate impact of Petrov's decision. The immediate aftermath of Petrov's decision was tense. The room was filled with a palpable sense of dread, as if everyone was holding their breath, waiting for the other shoe to drop. The air was thick with anxiety, and every second felt like an eternity. The atmosphere in the bunker remained charged with adrenaline and fear. Every eye was glued to the screens, every ear strained to catch the slightest sound. The tension was so thick it could be cut with a knife. It was a moment suspended in time, where the fate of the world hung in the balance. His superiors were skeptical, furious even, but they relented. They had no choice but to trust Petrov's judgment, despite their instincts screaming otherwise. The weight of the decision bore down on them, but they knew that acting rashly could lead to catastrophic consequences. The order to retaliate was not given. The command center, which had been a hive of frantic activity, suddenly fell silent. It was as if the entire world had paused, waiting to see what would happen next. The tension was almost unbearable. The missiles, if they ever existed, never came. Minutes turned to hours. The clocks seemed to tick in slow motion, each second dragging on interminably. The silence was deafening and the waiting was excruciating. It was a test of nerves, and everyone in that bunker felt the strain. The world held its breath, oblivious to the disaster that had been narrowly averted. People went about their daily lives, unaware of the knife edge they had been balanced on. It was a sobering reminder of how fragile peace can be and how close we can come to the brink without even realizing it. The early warning system was rechecked. The data was analyzed, every piece of information was scrutinized, every possibility considered. It was a painstaking process, but it was necessary to ensure that no mistakes had been made. The stakes were too high for anything less than absolute certainty. And then, finally, confirmation. It was a false alarm. The relief was palpable. It washed over the room like a wave, lifting the oppressive weight that had been bearing down on everyone. Quiet celebrations broke out, but there was also a sense of sobering realization of how close they'd come to disaster. A software glitch, a misinterpretation of sunlight reflecting off clouds, had triggered the terrifying alert. Relief washed over Petrov. He had trusted his instincts, and they had been right. But the knowledge that such a small error could have such enormous consequences was deeply unsettling. He had made the right call, but the gravity of the situation weighed heavily on him. The responsibility he had borne in that moment was almost unimaginable. He had been the thin line between peace and nuclear war, and the enormity of that realization was staggering. He had stared into the abyss of nuclear war and had the clarity of mind to pull back from the brink. It was a testament to his training, his instincts, and his courage. But it was also a stark reminder of how close humanity had come to annihilation. The world would never know how close it had come to destruction, nor the quiet heroism of the man who had saved it. Petrov's decision was a moment of profound significance, a turning point that had kept the world from plunging into chaos. His actions were a beacon of hope, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, there is always a chance for light.